What is up, my Sunlight Samurais, my Andronauts, Alpha Energy Males? Let's talk about copper on your LH, testosterone, sexual binding globulin, free testosterone. How effective is copper, and are you actually consuming enough copper to maximize your testosterone? Right, so this is the article that I wrote. Shout out to my wife for creating a fantastically great cover for this article right here. And so let's dive into how much copper you actually need and the optimal amount of copper, and are you actually consuming enough copper in the first place? So copper intake has been declining over the years, and it appears that a large fraction of the population does not even consume the recommended daily allowance of 0.9 milligrams per day, let alone the optimal intake of copper, which is 2.6 milligrams per day, according to this study. So in the EU and in the UK, half of the adult population consumes less than recommended amount of copper. And in the USA and Canada, at least a quarter of the population consumes less than the estimated average requirement. And another study found that over 80% of the population may get less than the RDA, which is 0.9 milligrams per day for copper from food. Around 1/3 of the diet contains less than 1 milligram of copper daily, and 61% contain less than 1.5 milligrams, and only 18% of the diet exceeds 2 milligrams per day. So if you're not eating high copper foods like animal foods, specifically like oysters and liver, you might not be consuming enough copper. And copper is very important for energy production, testosterone, LH, and so on. So the first step, copper on LH. So the effect of copper on LH release may occur in different mechanisms. So copper has been shown to directly promote LH release by enhancing the activity of GnRH receptors, amplifying the GnRH release activity of prostaglandin E2, binding to GnRH1, and enhances or modifies its receptor binding activity, binding to neurokinin B, a peptide that indirectly modulates GnRH release, and complexes with GnRH2 peptides, which stimulates LH as well as the production of testosterone independent of LH. So a lot of GnRH and LH talk there, but copper helps to increase LH and can even indirectly stimulate testosterone production by binding to GnRH2. All right, so copper on sex hormone binding globulin. So they supplemented these people with 8 milligrams of copper for a few months. You can see follow-up months, 6 months or so. So copper, by increasing ceruloplasmin, lowered sex hormone binding globulin. So I didn't add this graph, but you can see like their serum copper was more or less the same over 6 months, whereas ceruloplasmin increased and sex hormone binding globulin decreased. So it's not just about supplementing copper, it's actually about increasing your ceruloplasmin, because some people, by supplementing copper, the body is not utilizing that copper to create ceruloplasmin, and you need thyroid hormone for that to happen. So as ceruloplasmin goes up, which the sweet spot seems to be 35 milligrams per deciliter, then sex hormone binding globulin is at its lowest. And then as it went down, I found this most interesting because they supplemented copper for 6 months. But here by between 4 and 6, ceruloplasmin went down despite supplementing copper. So it might be that they were getting too much, maybe. Like, I'm not exactly sure why this happened. But sex hormone binding globulin also went down and then went up as ceruloplasmin went down. So this is why I'm always recommending people to test their serum copper and ceruloplasmin. You need to test ceruloplasmin, especially if you have high sex hormone binding globulin. Now, I don't necessarily think it's a good idea to supplement copper. It's very easy to get it from the liver. So you can eat 100 grams of beef liver, will give you 9.8 milligrams of copper. So it's so much easier to replenish your copper by eating liver because it contains all of the other cofactors you need for the mobilization of copper, for the storage of all of these nutrients, for the metabolism, like everything. Like it's so complex. It's so much more than just supplementing one mineral, right? All right, so this was free testosterone. Let's look at your total testosterone. So copper is essential for testosterone production, as low copper leads to low testosterone. But on the flip side, excess copper can also lead to low testosterone because it's a heavy metal. It can cause oxidative stress, damage, DNA damage, etc. So in rats, 1 milligram per kilogram of copper, which is equivalent to 0.16 milligram for a human dose, significantly increased steroidogenic enzymes, resulting in a raise in serum testosterone and LH, whereas higher doses, 2 and 3 milligrams per kilogram, inhibited the steroidogenic enzymes and lower testosterone. So copper can likely increase testosterone by increasing LH, complexing with GnRH, being a crucial part of the electron transport chain to assist in ATP production. And ATP, there's a positive correlation between ATP levels and testosterone. So as your ATP goes up, testosterone goes up. So that's why it's always important to maintain a high energy state, because everything in the body will work better when you're in a high energy state. And then also copper is a component of superoxide dismutase and catalase, and these are two main antioxidant enzymes that reduce reactive oxygen species. And we know that reactive oxygen species and oxidative stress, they damage the cells, and that eventually leads to low levels of testosterone. So copper is extremely important. So I would definitely aim for that 2.6 milligrams of copper on a daily basis to make sure I'm getting enough for testosterone optimization. And lastly, let's look at thyroid, right? So low copper can lead to elevated TSH and reduced T4 and T3 and cold intolerance. So I've worked with a couple of people that had cold intolerance, and their temperatures low. And when you started eating liver, the temperature went up, the cold hands and feet went away. They feel a lot better. Thyroid function improved a whole lot, right? So low T3 often leads to low levels of LH and testosterone at suboptimal testosterone to estrogen and low DHT to testosterone ratio. So when you look at hypothyroid individuals, they will normally have a little lower levels of testosterone, a little higher levels of estradiol. So the ratio is non-ideal. And T3 is also a very potent stimulator of 5-alpha reductase. So you have this 5-beta and 5-alpha reductase ratio. So the more hypothyroid you are, the lower your 5-alpha is, and you have like a 1-to-1 ratio of 5-beta to 5-alpha. So 5-beta creates 5-beta androgen metabolites from testosterone that's anti-androgenic. They're very neutral, they're even anti-androgenic. And so the bigger the ratio, the more androgenic metabolites you're creating. So let's say you are a 1-to-1 ratio. Now you're competing with a lot of anti-androgenic metabolites. The androgens are competing with anti-androgens. But now the bigger the ratio, the more androgens you have that outcompete the anti-androgens. So this is why that ratio is so important. And T3 helps to increase that ratio. And then also, food isn't the way it used to be, right? Because the soil is becoming really depleted. And foods as high in copper, including beef liver and shellfish, is not commonly eating in the Western diet, so people are really not consuming enough of that. And then muscle meats also contain a high ratio of zinc to copper, usually up to 50-1, and consumption of large amounts can actually lead to a copper imbalance. Too much zinc can lead to a copper deficiency. And then organ meats, by contrast, has a zinc to copper ratio of about 2-1. It's much more ideal. So this was quite interesting, that I found that the average copper content of fruits and vegetables declined by 81% between the years of 1940 and 2000, presumably because changes in farming methods that decreased availability of copper in the soil. So as a result, the animals feeding on that soil-depleted food, there was a reduction in copper in meat, cheese, and other dairy products, are also substantial, 55%, 91%, and 97%. Like, that's nuts. Like dairy products, 97% reduction in copper. That's insane. That means you're not getting any copper. So when you go to Chronometer and you're drinking milk that's been made from like grain-fed animals, and the grains was grown in a soil-depleted environment, that milk and dairy products will have very low levels of copper. So this is why it's important to eat like free-range animals and drink free-range or milk made from free-range animals, because the nutrient content will be so much higher. And that's what you need, because these free-range animals very likely hasn't been feeding on these farmed soils that are soil depleted, you know, when you like actually get high quality meat and dairy and so on. So and lastly, to make matters worse, the consumption of high fructose, the component in sucrose, honey, and fruits, can induce a copper deficiency via impaired intestinal absorption. So you need even more. So since the average American consumes roughly 100 pounds of sugar annually, this might contribute to copper deficiency. So combine high fructose intake or high sugar intake with low copper intake, that's going to lead to problems, low testosterone. So consuming fruit and honey and fructose is completely fine. Just make sure you have more more copper in the diet. And that's going to help to maximize your testosterone, prevent that deficiency. So markers of low testosterone would be low ceruloplasmin, low leukocyte copper, although this is a very, people don't really test for leukocyte copper, low transferrin saturation, low T4, low white blood cells, especially neutrophils, low red blood count, RBC, red blood count, and hematocrit, high cholesterol, LDL, triglycerides, and low HDL, fatty liver, high histamine, and low noradrenaline. So you're struggling to focus, you're not really getting in the mood, having low libido, brain fog, those kind of stuff. It's basically caused by the low noradrenaline. All right, guys, so copper is important. Most people are not eating enough copper. Make sure you have liver quite frequently, because that's one of the base sources of copper. If you don't like it, find a good recipe. you need to get some liver in your diet. All right, guys, I hope this video was helpful, and I hope this convinced you to start eating more copper-rich foods, not supplements. Eat copper-rich foods. That's going to give you the best results. All right, guys, hope you enjoyed this video, and I will check you in the next one. Cheers, guys.